Good afternoon, everybody. We start the third session. The rules and conditions apply as per previous sessions. I've got this afternoon 2 presenters. I'm told one of them will be done by video. This is Pierre Hona, Legal Affairs Officer, Competition and Consumer Policies Branch at Actant. So we'll have a video presentation from Geneva. But with us here, we've got Mr. Yoshinari, Assistant Director, ICN Matters, Japan Fair Trade Commission. We've got 5 discussants. I don't know whether I should say Mr. or Mrs. because it doesn't indicate on my list, so please.
Doesn't matter.
If it is customary for me to just mention a name without prefixing whether it is Mr. or Mrs. So say, I'll take it, Madam Chakla, but am I right? That's you.
That's me.
Oh, let's introduce ourselves. Please, can the discussants introduce themselves, starting from my extreme right.
Good afternoon. My name is Peter Mwencha from Kenyatta University in Kenya.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Abdullah Hussain. I'm in LNL Partners. It's a law firm.
Good afternoon. I'm Geeta Gauri. I used to be Member Competition Commission of India.
Good afternoon. I'm Shayanti Chakrabarti from the Competition Commission of India.
Okay. I have been already introduced, but I'm Ryohei Yoshinari from the Japan Fair Trade Commission. So I'm engaged in ICN issues and as well as G7 issues from last year. So
we're going to give Pierre on 10 minutes, please. Can you activate the video?
Hello, good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Can hear you.
For the opportunity to be here through Skype. I just hear the good voice of my dear friend, George Lipimili. So I say hello to you, George. Thank you for chairing this session. And of course, for the kind invitation to participate in these important conferences. The presentation that I'm doing today, it's about the interface between competition regime and sector specific in the online economy, challenges and opportunities in developing countries. I would like to refer to the agenda of this presentation in my next slide. The introductory part refers to what we have done so far in UNCTAD in the level of the interface between competition and sector regulation. I will also talk about some issues for consideration in general as opening remarks, but also I will talk about the challenges faced by developing countries and transition economies. I will make a comparison between offline and online economies, and I will also be talking about what would be a possible role of UNCTAD in the future regarding these particular challenges. I will end up with some conclusions. So, if I go to the next slide on the introductory remarks, let me refer to our UNCTAD model law on competition. It's chapter 7, which was revised in 2017. We talked about the advocacy role of competition authorities, the traditional advocacy role of competition authorities with regard to regulation and regulatory reform. This is an important area where we have been working quite actively in different countries. The second part is that talks about this chapter. It's the definition of regulation and sector-specific regulation. I think these are very important commentaries that we have received from member states as to what is the definition of regulation. There's also a section that deals with the competitive impact of regulation, and that leads to also understand what are the benefits and pitfalls of introducing regulation in some specific sectors of the economy. There is an area that deals with market failure and how to compensate, what are the measures to compensate market failure as a whole. This is something that we would like to talk about also when it comes to the online economy. A section in the model law deals with the regulatory barriers to competition. And in here, the assessment goes into 5 different factors. I think that the first one should deal with the idea of how regulatory barriers are or not creating administrative hurdles such as complex and lengthy authorization procedures for establishing of new market players. I think this is an important area where the Indian government has undertaken a number of measures to the ease of doing business in the last years. I think we have seen quite a lot of developments in India on this regard. Requiring compliance with uncommon norms and standards amounting to barriers to market entry, the issue of self-regulation and also voluntary compliance of competition norms in the area of sector-specific regulation should also be included in this assessment. The uncommon norms and the standards should also be incorporated in the analysis. Now, the third factor to be included in this area is the prevention of foreign firms from competing in national markets. Market access considerations could also be included in this regard to open up markets and have a level playing field. Privileging certain market players, for example, national champions, and thereby awarding them a competitive advantage. The area of competition neutrality or competitive neutrality has been widely studied in different countries. And there are, of course, very good lessons to be learned in different jurisdictions regarding on this particular matter. As a matter of fact, UNCTAD research platform has prepared a huge research on this topic, surveying different jurisdictions about the impact of competitive neutrality measures in the assessment of SOEs. The last point talks about the arbitrary public procurement and state aid decisions which distort competition. Of course, this is an area where competition policy and competition law enforcement should also be actively involved in preventing bid rigging activities in public procurement operations. This is an area where also our support has been very much geared towards the implementation of preventing measures in many of these jurisdictions that have requested the support of UNCTAD. Okay, so having said that, let me just go to the second point of my presentation. What are the issues for consideration? The different approaches to ensure coordination and policy coherence between sector regulators and the competition authority. Now, based on our observations from different jurisdictions, we can actually find different combinations as to how to achieve a workable level of coordination, so to speak, and policy coherence in the area of sector regulation and competition. Now, the first one refers to the combination of technical and economic regulation in the sector-specific regulation and leave traditional competition law issues such as the provision of anti-competitive conduct and merger control to competition law. Now, in this area, of course, there is a need for further coordination. There are, of course, specific activities that one could envisage in order to combine this type of expertise from different agencies. And of course, we will look at this later on how to mitigate some levels of overlaps between these particular combinations. The other area that we should take into account is the combination of technical and economic regulations in the sector specific. That is also includes some traditional competition law aspects. We have there, of course, some jurisdictions that we can refer to in this second part. There are jurisdictions that looked at competition law from the perspective of telecom sectors. This is the case of Mexico, for example, and Peru to some extent. And this is an area where the competition authority, for example, in the case of Mexico, was before the competition, the regulator on telecom matters, that was given additional competences to look into competition cases in the telecom sector, given the aggregate concentration of telecom markets in Mexico and abroad. Having this area of expertise, one could imagine that there were some frictions at the beginning between this competition, between these agencies, but later on, some measures were actually taken in order to avoid further frictions. The third point looks at the combination of technical and economic regulation that includes, of course, including the traditional competition law aspect, but also ensuring that the sector regulator performs its functions in coordination with the competition authority. Similar to the first and second assumptions, but in this case, it would be a sort of umbrella agency that deals with both areas at the same time. We also think that this is a possibility, but that requires a definition of specific Chinese walls in the constitution and structure of the regulatory agency in order to avoid overlaps as well internally.
Pierre, excuse me, Pierre. You have 2 minutes. So if you can wind up, and then we'll call you later.
Excuse me, I didn't hear.
You are remaining with 2 minutes to wind up. You are remaining with 2 minutes to wind up.
I have 2 minutes to finish my presentation. Is that so?
No, you can do the conclusions now, and then we may call you when we round up, when we're rounding up.
Okay, well, I haven't talked about the online economy, but if you want, we can just wrap up this area, and that's on the challenges faced by developing countries.
In that
I don't know
case,
if you hear that part.
let me give you 2-3 minutes. It appears you are not advised about the format of the session, because you had 10 minutes in total, but it appears you didn't know about that. So I've got 4 minutes. I'll give you 3 minutes of my 4 minutes. Talk about the online now, and then make your conclusions. Thank you.
Okay, well, in that case, I was about to talk about the difference between online and offline world. Let me just go to the online world then only, and then there is also 5 points that I would like to make. The first one is that, which is widely known, of course, the increasing dominance of global digital platforms and their control of data. That is an area where that has led to increasing inequalities in the global economy. So we think that in the latest UNCTAD Digital Economy Report of 2019, there is areas where we are suggesting some specific recommendations, like the need to ensure interagency cooperation and data protection areas, but also the need to ensure non-traditional sector regulators cooperation, like a financial, energy, and media. I would like to also say that if we go to the conclusion of my presentation, the last section, I would like to say that that the problem of traditional challenges faced in the offline world together and vis-a-vis the challenges being addressed in the online world might actually lead to other type of measures that should actually be incorporated in the analysis. We have actually seen and documented the experience of India in our report of the IGE this year, actually, 2019. We reported a regulation that was established at the beginning of this year in India in order to incorporate additional measures to mitigate the impact of the local and vis-a-vis regional as well as on large platforms in some sectors of the economy. So the telecom sector has actually undertaken a very important role in preventing future anti-competitive practices. Now, the last point I want to make is that if we talked about addressing the challenges of the digital economy, that also can help the attainment of some specific sustainable development goals, and that is in connection to sustainable development goals related to access to justice, as well as number 9, as well as number 12, and number 17, which is also encouraging global partnership, where we have global challenges with the online world. However, it is still very scarce in some countries, the problem of access to internet, and that also leads to additional challenges of the sector regulator that actually can be, to some extent, worked up in the area of agency coordination at the local and regional level. I would like to mention that the latest UNCTAD report on the digital economy, 2019, talks about the importance of data-driven economies, and we actually stand ready to support effectively these developing countries in addressing these challenges. Last point before I finished my last presentation is that we have in the competition issues in digital economy a section that also deals with additional measures related to policy coordination between competition and sector regulators. Because of time, I cannot go through this, but again, thank you very much for your invitation.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you. We may come back to you to conclude later on in 30 minutes' time. Now we can have the next presenter, Mr. Yoshinari, if you can make your intervention now. You have got 10 minutes.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. So, and I would like to thank CATS for invitation to me. And this is my first trip to India. And since ride-sharing service is prohibited in Japan, so it was my first experience in India to use Uber. Yeah, it was my first time to use Uber. Yeah, and so I have greatly enjoyed the Uber service. Yeah, from my hotel to this venue, and from this venue to my hotel, and that's what competition agencies should do to preserve competition between digital platforms, and as well as keeping consumer welfare by good and great services provided by digital platforms. And today I'm going to talk about 2 points from Japanese perspectives in accordance with the theme of this topic session on interministerial cooperation in Japan. And first, I'd like to talk about study group comprised of JFTC, Japanese Competition Authority, and other relevant ministries. And based on the discussion of the study group, the study group published a discussion paper on digital platform issues. So I would like to touch on that. And after that, so I would like to briefly explain the policy options provided by the working groups of the study group. And second, I would like to introduce a market study on digital platforms conducted by Japan Fair Trade Commission, and it was based on the discussion paper and policy options of the study group. And in the study report of the market study, so it showed problems which competition law and competition enforcement should be applied, and how we regulate these problems by sector regulations. And I would like you to see that we have some similarities between Japan and India. I heard that India has conducted market study and they have found similar problems in online platforms. So we'd like you to give your attention to these points as well. So the first point is that in Japan, so there is the interministerial study group, and in the beginning of 2018, study group was established in the between Japanese ministries. It was directed by Japanese government. So the Japanese government directed relevant ministries to discuss and establish rules to address digital platform issues. And in July 2018, Commission Authority, Japan Fair Trade Commission, and Industrial Ministry, METI, and Communication Industry, MIC, established study group, and the study group also includes experts on commercial policy, information policy, and consumer policy. And the study group held discussions several times, and to explore what kind of issues we have and what kind of problems we have. And also we conducted hearings inviting digital platforms, including Google or Apple. And based on the discussion of the study group, so the study group published a discussion paper in December 2018, and it suggested some discussion points in responding to the digital platforms. So it aims at solving problems caused by digital platforms and determines points which have to be considered and implemented by relevant ministries, including JFTC and other ministries. And it covers various issues, so it does not focus on only competition issues. It also refers to other areas than competition policy areas, such as rules on data transfer and open data, and disciplines to ensure transparency and fairness. And it also argues that it is necessary to conduct market study to understand trade practices regarding digital platforms. So today, I would like to focus on these three things. So first of all, so the discussion paper argues it is necessary to ensure transparency and fairness because digital platforms can be problematic because of the rule-making systems or ecosystems caused by that platform, and it can lead to the unfair trade practices or invasion of privacy issues. And second one is it's necessary to explore rules to ensure data transfer and open data. So digital platforms can accumulate huge amount of data in that platform from the viewpoint of consumer policy and competition policy. So it is beneficial for us to have data transfer and open data. So they argue that it's necessary to discuss how to improve data transfer and open data, and whether it is good or not. And also, third point, it is related to the first point, that so if we establish rules to ensure transparency and fairness in digital platforms, we need to understand actual state of trade practices in digital platforms. So the study group suggests that it's necessary to conduct JFTC's market study. So you can see the overview of the discussion paper. I don't touch on each of them because I have time go over the time restraints. And but as I introduced earlier, so point 3.1 and point 3.3 and point 5 was already introduced in my last presentation. Also, I would like you to focus on point 3.2. Okay, yeah. So it's acknowledges the importance of digital organization of digital economy, specialized in digital economy. Okay, so the policy options proposed by the working groups of the study group. So the study group established 2 working groups. So it is first one is established to ensure transparency and fairness, and second one is specialized in data transfer and open data. And the first working group proposed 2 options. So we have 2 options. It is first one is competition law. So we need to enforce competition law strictly to utilizing guidelines, commitment, and market study to address the competition policy issues in platforms. And also, the study group suggests that we need complementary regulations, such as the ex-ante regulation, so which prevents violation of competition law or something like that. You see in the PowerPoint slide. And the second working group proposed that so we need to consider the policy options, such as rules which clarify terms for better data transfer, or which ensure convenient data transfer, or ensure safety, or ensure interoperability. And so, and we also conducted a market study especially on online retail platforms and app stores. And I would like to touch on one of the examples of possible anti-competitive conduct from the study report. So it is exclusion of competitors. So platforms provide, okay, I will finish here? Or should I?
1 second.
1 second, okay. So exclusion of competitors can be a violation of competition law in Japan, and so it needs to enforce competition law to regulate these kind of conducts. But also, JFTC acknowledges that we are also required to establish ex-ante regulation to avoid these problems. So we need to establish sector-specific regulations or scheme or protection of personal information. Okay, so I would like to touch on this conclusion after that.
No, thank you. You still have 3 minutes at the end of the session. Now I come to discussants. We've got 4 discussants, but please don't start by thanking cards. Your chairman will thank cards for inviting you. If I can have Mr. Madam Chaklapadi, Joint Director, Economics, Competition Commission of India. Oh, sorry. If you can start, please don't thank them. Huh? I will do that.
But I can still, say that my compliments to the presenters for two very interesting presentations. And it actually kind of allowed an opportunity to look at the regulatory landscape in India in light of your discussion. Dr. Horner, in his presentation, he talked about the different approaches to ensure coherence and coordination between sector regulators and competition authorities. So if we look at the different statutes that govern sector regulators in India, we find, besides technical aspects, explicit mention of, the competition mandate. Be it in, for example, Section 11 of the TRI Act or Section 60 of the Electricity Act, several provisions in the PNGRB Act, they make a kind of broad declaration of competition goals without obviously giving any specifications. Probably the implicit understanding was that because these regulators were, created as instruments of liberalization to open up these markets to competition, they would, in their ex-ante role, create such price or access regulations which would make the market structurally conducive for competition in an ex-ante framework, and the Competition Commission comes in ex post, where even in the regulated sectors there's a anti-competitive behavior found to be indulged by enterprise or enterprises. However, the apparent overlap has led to litigations on jurisdictional ground. Over the last 10 years, CCI has adjudicated a number of cases in regulated sectors, and in many of those cases, parties have actually challenged CCI's jurisdiction. And one such case actually reached the apex stage last year, where the Supreme Court has pronounced its judgment. And in this case, a technical aspect and competition aspect, they were intertwined. And here the Supreme Court essentially said that, see, the technical aspect, and here, in the telecom case, point of interconnection was at the core. The issue of point of interconnection was at the core of the case. So the apex court said that this is a technical matter which the sector regulator is better equipped to handle, and probably it's the primary domain of the sector regulator. Also, the same issues were before the sector regulator. Therefore, if CCI was allowed to intervene, that could lead to conflicting views, which should be avoided. And finally, once the determination on technical aspects is done by the sector regulator, then it is the exclusive domain of the CCI to see whether that denial of points of interconnection was on account of an anti-competitive agreement between the operators, the telecom incumbent operators. Now, coming to the online markets, I think several very important takeaways for competition enforcers from both the presentations. And also, I think these are new territories. Regulators are still understanding these markets. New ecosystems, new products are being developed as we speak. And as the cuts note also very appropriately mentions, that the effect of digital technologies could vary across markets, and they can affect a number of markets and sectors. And therefore, there could be a sectoral dimension to the regulatory approach that we may have. But from a competition law perspective, I think the basic principles and the tests of competition law will be sector neutral, sector agnostic. Certain specific factors which may be relevant for competition assessment in a particular market, which may involve a particular technology, that may be taken into account, and the Indian statute gives the flexibility, has the flexibility to allow the Commission to do that. And in fact, disruptions, that note also talks about disruptions. Disruptions, if they are on account of better technologies and innovation, that will still be seen as competition on the merits. And in fact, many conduct, so-called potential anti-competitive conduct, which are being looked at in different jurisdictions, be it leveraging, self-preferencing, conglomeration of activities, etc. They can be, they are amenable to case-by-case competition assessment, because the competition law allows for a rule of reason analysis. So you can actually do that balancing exercise and see what is the net effect on market. But having said that, we recognize, I mean, these are my personal views, that there could be a need for ex-ante regulation also, like we have seen in the JFTC presentation. They are talking about transparency norms for digital platforms. that can help bridge information asymmetry and create incentives for platforms to compete. So such ex-ante regulations might be necessary, but any ex-ante regulation while designing should be, one must do it with great care because its potential investment or innovations timing effects. But I think, as in your last slide, you said that is it ex-ante or ex-post? I think it's going to be an optimal combination of both ex-ante and ex-post. And also, when both of you talked about interagency cooperation, yours was an integrated approach where all relevant ministries, you got together and you could see the issues from multiple perspectives before any regulations or rules come. I think that's a great way to go ahead with this. And I think interagency cooperation will also be extremely important in data matters. In the way we deal with the horizontal regulations or regulators, like data protection law. We are yet to have one in India, but once we have it, the data related cases, like there's a strong and clear link between data and competition. So in cases, competition law cases where data may be involved, for example, in designing data remedies, I foresee a lot of, a need for interagency cooperation there. So in terms of designing the interoperability norms or data sharing norms, there should be discussion and between the Data Protection Authority and the CCI. And the Competition Law Review Committee has actually proposed to widen the ambit of this consultation. As of now, the statute allows for a consultation when there's a proceeding or when our actions are in conflict with each other's statutes. The proposal is to widen this beyond just conflict and proceedings. And also it talks about MOUs, so you can have a mode of cooperation and you know how much information and when they will be shared. So I think even when the sector regulator has no competition jurisdiction and the competition law authority does not have any specific inputs into regulatory decision, we share a plethora of mutual interests. So it only makes sense that we talk to each other more often so that we can have a efficient regulatory architecture which can make these new age markets work well for all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now I'll call upon the former member, Competition Commission of India, Madam Gauri. If please you can make your intervention.
It has these twists, and the twist comes in because they made it very wide. It's also nice to follow my joint director, Sayanti, whom I had the pleasure of choosing. And as luck would have it, I had very good people in my commission, and she has covered most of the issues. But there's certain things that I'd like to make observations on what the UNCTAD presentation was and also of yours from Japan. I think the one thing that one has to accept is that sector-specific regulators do not have a role. They just have to come into the Competition Commission where you could have a little bit of a place for them. And in this Competition Commission also, you would only require for them where technology has still retained the natural monopoly bit. So let's get this clear. We had a big discussion on this. Thanks to Uday, I was in Chennai discussing this, how sector-specific is no longer relevant. But then what brings up the question, which is very important, which is where I find that both the presenters have not discussed it, is that the Competition Act itself has to be changed continuously. Sayanti is a very gentle person. She's also very diplomatic. But the Act and the revision to the Act has been framed in the product market monopolistic competition framework, and therefore it is dated. The Competition Act was dated even before I became a member, and the new Competition Act is not able to get into the online economy, which is what Kutz is hinting at. On the question of how do you handle online economies in the sector-specific areas, whether it is health, whether it's electricity, whether it's telecom, and we have looked at it partially, I think, in the morning when you talked about distributed platforms. But I would like to focus just a little bit more, because unless we do that, we're again stuck in the product market. We're looking at ex ante. We're not looking at new markets that are coming up, which is market for ideas. And this is where the network market and the discussion has to go forward. And what I found is that since both the main speakers didn't concentrate, I'll take it upon myself to raise some very significant issues, because the note from Cuts raises this. I can't handle all the sector. I will not look at data privacy, which is also something connected. I will not look at the question of how you have anonymity of data. But one thing that one would have to take a look, and no cases has come, where I have spent a lot of time, is on the question of the crypto technology and the Bitcoin market. I'm using this because it also deals with the sector where it is the financial sector, but this is the technology where people feel it's highly decentralized, it's very competitive, and there are no antitrust issues. Because there's so many cases involved, let me just stay with the cryptocurrency, which I spent a little time of looking at it. Now, what is this about cryptocurrency and why it cannot handle in the traditional act that comes up, which all countries seem to deal with it, is first, is that when there is a cryptocurrency, the technology believes in what is known as a distributed ledger. Which means when you have a distributed ledger, whether you're in health or finance and your data is anonymized, it also means that there's only a peer-to-peer relationship and it's totally transparent. So no centralized controlling institution is required. But it'll be only those who know about it would have access to this knowledge. This is what was said about the Bitcoin and the cryptocurrency that came up with it. And they said there were about 171 exchanges. Now there are only 2 exchanges or 3 exchanges left behind. But what else is there that allows for this cryptocurrency and the distributed legislation or distributed ledger, which talks in terms of decentralization, is the fact that as in the cryptocurrency, if you're able to get hold of an algorithm by which you can access the data of others, then you have a link to information which, however anonymized, gets into one group. And this is where data mining, which I noticed and studied for the cryptocurrency, allowed for. This was pooling. And when you pool, you cartelize. And when you cartelize, you can also have an abuse of dominance. The competition law nowhere talks about it. None of the countries have taken up this issue, or how do you handle it, how do you look at algorithms, and how one has to be flexible and get out of this product market monopolistic structure, because if they're monopolies, they're also gains to welfare. I know that in the morning, that is what must have been talked in terms of platforms in the market. But it is also important, and this is very quickly, I want to finish because there's some yellow sign. I don't know if it means I stop or I go ahead. But there's also a very important point that has to be remembered, that if you're dealing with algorithms, and this is where I like the point made by GFTC, you need a group which is technically competent to know what are the algorithms that can be used and how they intervene and how these pools occur. And this is something which has to be taken into the Competition Commission, and then the normal Competition Commission should look at what are the signs of it. Are the prices going in one direction? Are they falling? Are they rising? You don't have concepts like predatory pricing, but you still can try to see whether there are pools being formed and how does one intervene, or better still, not to intervene, but create conditions for more competition so that each one fights against the other. This is a subject for Cuts to take it up in the next series of biennial conferences. Yes, I'm over.
Thank you very much. That was excellent. Referring to Cuts, I can see Pradeep very happy about that. Now let's have the lawyer's perspective. Somebody who's practicing outside there looking at what we do. Please, can we have Mr. Hussein make your statement?
Right, good afternoon, everyone. Since I've been proscribed from thanking Cuts, I will just take a step back to sort of
I would do that.
to just set the context in which this entire debate has come about, there is a major dissatisfaction with the kind of market concentration we are seeing today, and this has spilled over even into the digital economy. And we have, as we all know, 4 large digital giants, and more they have come under scrutiny, particularly because of data privacy issues, and to a large extent because of a lack of understanding of how they interact with the various market players. The second, how they gather the data, how they use this data. There's a perception that they are abusing this data once they collect it, and I do not intend to speak for them, but what I would like to say is that to a large extent, what really needs to be done, rather than overhauling the legal standards that apply to these companies, which frankly, in my opinion, the current legal standards are sufficient to address them, similar to what the CLRC has noted, and to what Mr. Chakrabarti was saying earlier. But in terms of the tools and the adequate tools that competition authorities might need, definitely more understanding, and in that sphere we have seen the Competition Commission undertake market studies. Currently there is an e-commerce study that's going on. There are 2 other studies also reportedly going on. So that's certainly what we need to do in terms of how these platforms interact, not only on the consumer side, because on the consumer side we are looking at gathering of data and how that's used, but also on the seller side, particularly on the e-commerce side, on the advertiser side. What are the terms and conditions with which these platforms interact with these participants? And that is an area that has increasingly come under focus. Even the US DOJ, I understand, is looking at Amazon and how it is working not only as a platform but also as a seller, something that Ms. Yoshinari's study also said is a serious concern these days. And it is in these sort of areas that competition law should certainly step in. The Commission should certainly keep under its focus, and to some extent I believe it has. If you look, currently there is an investigation going on against Make My Trip and OYO, which is a new digital age, 2 new digital age companies. It has already looked at Google and Find Google once that we know of. There is a second investigation going on. And if you look at the Bayer-Monsanto merger transaction, in fact, the Competition Commission did look at how these companies were performing in the area of digital farming, how they were gathering data, and even though it wasn't to a large extent present in India, they have made it a remedy in their final order approving the transaction that this data will have to be shared with a government authority. So all these areas of data collection and their use is already well within the cognizance of the Commission, and it is undertaking market studies to understand how e-commerce platforms work and how they interact with these market participants. And in terms of algorithmic collusion as well, the other major area that we have, you heard Mr. Sikri in the earlier panel where the Commission again has looked at how this is playing out. That was in the airline sector, but it also indicates that it is certainly right on top of their agenda, and they are looking at all these issues. Finally, I'd just like to make one comment about sector regulation. We already have numerous sectoral regulators. I do not believe personally that we need a specialized sectoral regulator for the digital economy. There are regulations being proposed in terms of data privacy. The government is looking at localization of data. They are looking at e-commerce regulations. The FDI policies were recently tweaked in response to brick and mortar retailers going to the central government and complaining about the Amazons of this world. And even the consumer protection law has recently been proposed to be modified to include predatory pricing. So we have this whole gamut of regulation that is being looked at in order to address these concerns. What is required, like Ms. Chakrabarti was saying, I think we do have provisions in our statute for these regulators to interact with each other. Unfortunately, over the last 10 years, the provisions that are in the Competition Act haven't really been utilized to that extent. To some, this might be in some part because of the way they are framed. It is not mandatory at the moment that they do interact with each other, but perhaps we need to look at more ways to encourage this. I'll stop there.
Thank you very much. Danger of over-regulation. Now, can we have the last discussant, Mr. Mwencha from Kenya University, the lecturer at Kenya University. I think he's the youngest PhD holder in this room.
Thank you, George. Yes. So I'll give a Kenyan perspective or African perspective for that matter, and focus more on practical cases, as well as just try and put it into context in terms of what has been said. So yes, we are facing a digital disruption of traditional business models in Africa and Kenya in particular. And we have what we call digital online marketplaces that have now become very popular by users in Kenya and other larger economies in Africa. But what is important to note here is that we have an authority, or we have authorities that competition authorities that are challenged by these new platforms, and there are various reasons why they are challenged, including capacity and the new nature of some of these services, and some of these areas where the challenges are very prevalent is mobile money, the financial services sector. If you've heard of M-Pesa, yes, so M-Pesa has become what was referred to in the morning as or yesterday as a utility in Kenya. So if you don't have M-Pesa, you're not gonna transact in Kenya, or you're going to have a lot of challenges transacting. So digital money or mobile money transfer has now become like the norm in Kenya. And you see the company that is running M-Pesa, which is Safaricom, owned by Vodafone and the government. They've become so strong or powerful, they're moving into other sectors and also disrupting other segments of the economy. We also have, so that's also in a broader context, that's fintech space. And we have a lot of interest now in the fintech sector. Kenya is one of the third, I think Kenya, Nigeria, and South Africa are the hubs for fintech innovation in Africa. So there's a lot of interest again in fintech in Kenya, and there's a very interesting what I would call experiments going on in the fintech space. So and just to mention what you have, we have a what you call Capital Markets Authority, which is a specific, which is a sector-specific regulator for the capital markets, and you can see challenges between what the Capital Markets Authority wants to do and the central bank wants to do, and the telecommunications regulator, which is the Communications Authority of Kenya. So they are all trying to, regulate this space, and they're not able to agree on how to do it because the central bank has termed fintech as a risk because of cryptocurrency and this mobile money. What I'm going to mention next, what you call digital lending. I was reading a newspaper about the crisis in India with digital lending. It's the same thing in Kenya. We have so many people who've been now blacklisted by the what you call credit reference bureaus because of over indebtedness, and because there's no I think digital literacy is lacking, and there are no controls in terms of people are borrowing from multiple lenders, and this is all supported by the M-Pesa platform that I mentioned before. So because of M-Pesa, many people are able to use APIs and ride on the data that Safaricom, which runs M-Pesa, has, and that has just created this credit explosion, which is now creating a crisis because so many people, especially in the lower segments of the economy, are now indebted, and now the central bank is stepping in because of also fears of fears of money laundering. So I can see the yellow, the sign. Just give me 1 minute. So what we are also noticing is there's a lot of, from an industrial policy perspective, we also have a lot of Chinese e-commerce companies that have come in. So the fear here is that, especially now that we are having what you call the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, we have, and Pradeep was involved in the negotiations and cuts. We've been working with the African Union in the protocols. We are having a lot of Chinese e-commerce companies, and they are all importing Chinese products into various African countries. Kenya is not unique. You also have Amazon, but the prevalent ones, the dominant ones are Chinese. So what you're seeing is there is a fear of dumping. And Africa, the data from the United Nations UNCTAD and United Nations Economic Commission for Africa is that Africa is actually deindustrialized because of imports from, especially from China. And in Kenya in particular, we are seeing that we used to be the manufacturing hub for the region. So Kenya had the largest share of exports in the region. And in the last 10 years, because of China, our share of the exports has actually gone down significantly. And e-commerce is a big part of this. So if you want to buy a car, you just go online, you can get a car from Japan. If you want to buy fittings for your hotels, we have a lot of hotels that are being built. You just go and order a whole, whatever furnishings on the hotel from China. So those are some of the issues that are being faced. And the competition authority in Kenya are not just, and maybe George can confirm, they really don't have the capacity to address these challenges because they're happening so fast. And I think, and that's the fear now as we go towards a continental, free trade area. But there's a lot of implications for it, and I think there's, from what we learned when we were working on the protocols, there's a lot of discussions that need to be held around what these locally based foreign companies are doing. And somebody mentioned digital colonialism in the earlier session. This is actually a term that is being mentioned very often in Kenya, at least. So thank you. I'll stop there.
Thank you, Mr. Mwecha. A word of caution, competition authorities don't talk ill of each other. Now you have heard from the presenters and discussants. Now the floor is open to interrogate the topic some more. We start with Mr. Young.
I used to work in Nairobi, and I was with DFID, so I was at the early stages of M-Pesa. And what always struck me about M-Pesa was the growth of M-Pesa within Kenya. People weren't seeing the growth of a tech firm like Safaricom as a bigger threat as we are seeing for other tech companies within countries. I mean, why is that, do you think, in Kenya? It almost seems people are proud of the growth of M-Pesa, which again is very different from the reactions to the growth of other tech platforms within other countries.
It's not an intervention, but it's to the point of what Peter is saying about premature deindustrialization. Africa as a continent, I actually did a bit of study on Africa's trade. Your premature deindustrialization is not caused by China, but of course it has exacerbated the issue naturally. But your premature deindustrialization, because you had very poor bilateral agreements, especially with EU, which have basically taken away a great deal of your industrialization base from the very beginning. So going forward, I know this is talking about digital economy, but I'm going on trade because I come from trade. How you actually negotiate a trade agreement with digital trade is going to be very crucial to the single African market, because that's where you can leverage and build what we call this new industrialization. From that, do certification, and a lot of things that you can actually learn from Asia, from a lot of the countries in Asia that we've helped. On the point of Ms. Geeta, Gary, I totally agree with you. A sector approach is going to be irrelevant going forward because of the unbundling effects that's happening. Again, certification is basically the main theme of digital economy. It will blur what is digital and what is service. And we've had problems with WTO already on online gambling. 2 cases in point, one saying that online gambling is a product, one saying it isn't. So you have a situation where digital services is going to complicate multilateral trade agreements as much as our own national regulatory issues itself. Yeah, that's just my point.
Mr. Mehta.
George, are you calling me?
Yes, please. I saw your flag is up.
Yeah, no, you said Mr. Mehta, so I was just wondering.
Okay. Okay, Pradeep.
That's far better.
Anyway, I always call him Pradeep, so that's why it's surprised I'm calling Mr. Mehta, because I'm chairman. I've got to act, I have to behave like a chairman.
Right, Mr. Chairman? Greetings. As in Africa, they say all protocols observed. It's a very good way how to start your presentation. But the point which Geeta made about cryptocurrency, which is another which is area which is going to be of great trouble. I don't know whether there's something happening in Africa on cryptocurrency. In India, of course, I don't know whether the cryptocurrency has actually arrived. But it is happening in many parts of the world. And so, in theory, I can trade in cryptocurrency sitting here once it is online, and people do. It may not be operating in India, but an online world, there are no boundaries. There are no boundaries at all. There are no visa requirements, nothing at all, except when it comes to delivery. Now, in the case of cryptocurrency, and if I'm speculating, for example, then I get the profit or loss into my account. And how does it, then translate into any kind of law and order situation in India? I mean, that is something which I'm still trying to understand. As we discussed in the earlier session, Geeta, you're not here. But what we are seeing now, the algorithms are themselves self-learning. So after a few efforts, they start beating humans also. And the experiments have shown that. So we are looking at a very, how should I say, a dark future. That there are a lot of these things happening which are beyond the capacity of our regulators or even the people in order to deal with it. So now M-Pesa is, of course, dealing with actual currency. But what stopped M-Pesa to turning into a cryptocurrency? After all, there is no physical handling of cash in M-Pesa in that sense. So you're transacting completely through your mobile. Online. So you can use cryptocurrency as the currency instead of using Kenya shillings, for example. I mean, the possibility is very, very easy. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Alan. Let me have Alan and then the black dollar you want to talk about. Okay, Alan, hold on. It appears there's some connection with what Pradeep has said and what you want to say. I'll come to you later. Sure. Okay, you wanted to clarify again.
Just a small education for everyone from technology's perspective. So M-Pesa cannot provide cryptocurrency because it's a totally different platforms altogether. Cryptocurrency is on blockchain application. It's a different application from what M-Pesa does, which is a carrier payment system. So 2 different platforms, they don't interoperate. So if M-Pesa wanted to provide cryptocurrency, they would need to create a blockchain architect in order to do that. So it's impossible, yes. It feels like it can, but it's not.
I think this matter, you have your, when you are rounding up. Yes. Is it on the same issue? On M-Pesa? Okay, Alan, I'll come to you. I'll recognize you later.
So, my proposition and question is a response to the notion that most regulators fail in their duty most of the time. And nowhere is that truer than in relation to industry-specific regulators who are either captured by the industries they were set up to regulate or suffer from lack of resources or incompetence or both. Now, in saying that, I admit to my own failures as somebody who's been involved in industry-specific regulating also over 30 years. But one of the problem that arises is that industry-specific regulators tend to have statutory mandates that are often carved out of the economy and prevent generalist regulators such as competition bodies from acting where they can and should. Now, I think this is especially the case in developing countries where the competition bodies and consumer agencies are the poor cousin, and the sector-specific ones that get all the lobbying and political favour mean that they can't touch industry. So I'm just putting it on the agenda for us today that in this question of the interface between competition regime and sector-specific regulators, we have to fully understand the political economy of these compromised regulators and recognise that there's a need to find a way of getting economy-wide general principles that aren't so subject to capture or favouritism on the job.
Thank you, Alan. As for developing countries, you may wish to know that sector regulators were established first. It was only after 10, 15 years. That's when we started seeing competition authorities being established. So sector regulators are the head start. Second, the sector regulators, it was a conditionality by the World Bank that we have got to put them in place, hive them from the ministries. We have got to have these sector regulatory bodies. Suffice to say that now, they're businessmen here, they are complaining that we are over-regulated. We have now, you can't count the number of sector regulators you have in a given country, and each of these impacting on one small businessman. 100 licenses around his office, which he has to comply with. But let me have the gentleman there.
Thank you so much. So it's a question to Peter, and perhaps George, you can also, help. Well, we are talking about, more and more, we are talking about technological sovereignty, right? So it's basically, it's not protectionism per se, because when your data is with international companies, a part of sovereignty is away from you. In the context of Africa, especially Africa, why I'm mentioning it, because Chinese companies are making inroads through Belt and Road Initiative, and they're having tie-ups with the African countries, and they're taking data from these countries. So there is a news story which features in today's Financial Times. May I just read out an excerpt from the story? It's a short one. So it starts like, data from African markets is of course is of particular interest to Chinese companies who are looking to improve the accuracy of their facial recognition algorithms, particularly to identify people of color. For instance, a deal between Chinese facial recognition company CloudWalk and government of Zimbabwe means the latter will send data on millions of African faces to Chinese company to help train in technology. Okay, so this is one part, and the second part is standardizations of IoT. As of now, African countries are just the technology taker. They are not anyway involved in the standardization process. So as a continent, what do you plan to do? And what is the level of awareness around this issue? Thank you.
So I have a quick question which is somewhat related to Alan's point, is that we have heard about many problems that society is facing
because of the technological change. But I think that we have not heard anyone saying that this is the limit of competition policy. And probably many of these problems are not about, should not be addressed by competition policy, but rather by other areas of expertise. And I think that you all mentioned some kind of holes of expertise in competition law. So I think that perhaps if you have any specific thoughts about what would be the limit or what should be the limit, it would be important to hear.
I think now we can call upon our discussants and our presenter. You can answer any of the questions. You don't need it to answer in any format. So I'll start with Peter, since most of the questions are directed to Africa.
Okay. Let me start with, I think, Jonathan's question about the national pride in M-Pesa. Yes, I think this boils down to the fact that every country is trying to have their own niche area that they're good at, or national champions. So in Kenya, I think the government would want to tout M-Pesa as Safaricom as a national champion because it's we are trying to establish what we call the Silicon Savannah in Kenya, and we would want to, from a branding perspective, say, look, Kenya, this is what we can do. So, but then again, so that's now from a macro view. But coming down to the reality is that in Africa, we've had a challenge, or we had a problem of lack of financial inclusion. So M-Pesa has broadened the financial inclusion space. And I think people, because of the tangible benefits, it's very hard to come and tell people about the risks or dangers of M-Pesa, especially with the low financial literacy in the continent, in Kenya as well. So that, I think, kind of explains why you would see a lot of people relating to or having a positive attitude towards M-Pesa. But if you talk to the competitors, then it's a different story. If you talk to, I think it's Bharti Airtel from India, that has, it's Bharti, right? Yeah, Airtel. They are always going to court and suing M-Pesa, and they want it to be separated and from Safaricom, and they want to also use the same agents, because what Safaricom has done, and this is something that the competition authority is looking at, is the agents are exclusive. So when you, the thing about M-Pesa, and I'm sure you understand how it works, is yes, you can transact, but if you want the physical money, you have to go to an agent to withdraw. But Safaricom has restricted Bharti Airtel from using those agents. You have to build your own infrastructure, which is now a problem for them, because the market share, Safaricom has got almost 70% or 80% of the market share in mobile money. So, and why should you build another infrastructure when this one is already in place? So from a competitor perspective, and I was just speaking to some Chinese, we're doing a market study on the fintech space. And I was talking to some, we have something called Kenya ICT Network. So we're doing, I'm leading some study on the Kenya market space. And I was talking to some Chinese, and even the Chinese are struggling to disrupt Safaricom in the mobile money. So they've done studies. Actually, it's funded by Huawei, because they want to understand how do we disrupt M-Pesa. So it's a problem for everyone, for Bharti, for the Chinese. But this is a British company. With DFID, you are the guys who funded the whole experiment.
One point to mention. Alibaba's a national treasure in China. Would we be having a very different conversation today if Google, Facebook, and Uber were Indian startups? Is what I'm trying to make.
So I think that's the scenario. So for us in Kenya, we're like, anybody can come in. It's a competition. So, but the Bharti Airtel issue is it's been very pronounced, and Safaricom has it's now a legal issue. There was a British company, Analysis Mason, that did a study about the dominance of Safaricom. The report has been shelved for obvious reasons. So we are still, the discussion is going on, and I don't think it will be resolved soon.
Let's move from M-Pesa and
yes. So the second question
other
is,
issues. Yes.
So the other one was the technological sovereignty. And this goes back to the digital colonialism issue. I think that this is the biggest problem. This is the elephant in the room, because if you look at Kenya, which is relatively way ahead of our neighbors and other African countries, if you look at the ownership of the companies, like what I've just explained, it's all foreign. Secondly, if you look at even the startups, and these are the big companies that pay a lot of taxes. If you go to the startup space again, to enter into the Kenyan market and disrupt certain industries, you need a lot of capital. Nairobi and Kenya is not cheap to operate because the salaries are high. You know, we've got a lot of multinationals. So if you want good talent, you have to pay a lot of money to attract talent. You office space, and you have to open.
Okay, Peter. Yeah. The less you do it bilateral. Let's have Ms. Gauli, and then you are next. Yeah. 1.5 minutes. Sorry. The timekeeper is telling me that this session has
ending.
Changed the lens.
I know, but you know, when you deal with such difficult topics, to make us speak within 3 minutes and cover everything, you do come out a little confused. And however hard you try, some points don't get explained. And there's some ideas that have come out in the discussion, which is very good. That's why I said, Pradeep, we should have a separate session on it. First thing is why I'm bothered about the Competition Act. The model used is the product market model. That does not explain monopolistic competition. It lands you up with abuses which are more extortionary than exclusionary. It doesn't deal with market for ideas. It doesn't deal with innovation. It doesn't deal with network benefits. That's where the problem. There's no flexibility in the Competition Act, and the idea is how you build up flexibility. I have argued continuously for it, but we hope some change will come, because even the new review doesn't talk about it. And that is more worrying. And the reason why I specifically brought up the fintech market, especially the cryptocurrency, is because I didn't want to go into Libra, which is the case that the EU has looked at. There's a difference between the Bitcoin and the cryptocurrency. But even within the cryptocurrency, they have contracts between MasterCard and Visa card. So you're going out of circulation of what is the normal currency payments and credit markets. And there are a large number of issues involved. It's not necessary that the EU is going to come up with things, but an investigation may be necessary. That's the problem with M-Pesa. But then coming back again, and because he's given me only 1 minute that goes off, and we're talking about digitalization, we have to look at markets for ideas. We have to look at networks. We have to look at platform. And I liked your idea very much, or where you said how to negotiate trade arrangements in digital trade. You know, these are all questions that are coming up. I don't have immediate answers. There's a lot that has to be thought of. And this thinking and the possibility, and the reason why I bought the Bitcoin currency, there's a lot of studies that have been shown, which shows that these exchanges have got reduced, and mining. And mining is a pool where they're getting into access to information in distributed ledger technology, which is worrying. And Pradeep, people mine in India. In Bangalore, I met quite a few people who were investing in the Bitcoin and they can't get out of it. You see, earlier everyone said we're making a profit. And then they found, because there was a merger taking place between various exchanges and mining companies, the prices were being manipulated, and they're fluctuating widely. And they can't get out of it. In the US, I think you could pay for some of the university to go into it. And you have Venezuela, which are, it's a government which doesn't have any currency, or maybe the currency itself is in a different way. And competition law should get out of this structure of monopolistic competition, product market, predatory pricing. They're all right for some things, but they have to be, again, rethought, reworked out. And that we're not doing. That's the point, as well.
Thank you. Need to look at new issues, new horizons, and Mauritius is just doing that. Mr. Hussain.
Yeah, I'll just take Mr. Obak's question on the limits of competition law and policy. And like I mentioned, data collection and the use of that data, that is certainly a factor that competition authorities should take into account. I believe they do fall within the current regime of competition law, and they are taken into account. But not so much when it comes to privacy issues and data privacy. Perhaps that is outside the remit. Similarly, the extent of foreign investment in e-commerce platforms is something perhaps better left to other authorities in the central government rather than competition law issues. Just a quick mention on Ms. Gauri's comment also. I think I would defer to a certain extent in relation to the legal standard that's currently applied, consumer welfare standard. I believe in terms of how it's enforced is where we see this whole difference of approach between the United States and Europe, where we can see that Europe has taken the lead in terms of aggressive enforcement using the same standard, whereas the United States seems to have fallen to second or third place. Now, in terms of looking at innovation and these other sort of effects other than price, certainly this already forms part of consumer welfare standard, in my opinion, and that's what's been seen in Europe, and India follows Europe to a large extent, I believe.
I think you need a course on economics. That's
Ah.
all I can say. You haven't understood
Mr.
welfare
Yoshinari,
economics.
please, 2 minutes. I can see the timekeeper. She's no longer smiling at me.
Okay, so just a quick personal comment. So we have reached a consensus to some extent in this issue. So first, so we have learned a lot about the characteristics of digital markets, such as multi-sidedness or networking effects. So we have learned a lot. And the second, so we have found possible anti-competitive conducts or anti-competitive issues in digital markets. So such as HFC's digital platforms inquiry or FTC's hearings, and we JFTC and also Indian Competition Authority conduct market studies, and we have found some problems. And third and finally, we now in the time of crafting tools for responding to these issues, such as devising or clarifying guidelines or something like that, and considering restrictions of resources or considering characteristics of each jurisdiction. So even if there are limitations of competition law, we have to do that. Competition policy should do that. I think so.
Thank you. And Madam Chakrabarti.
Yeah, just a quick comment on Dr. Gauri's views on markets, and see, I totally agree with her when she says, we should not pigeonhole competition into artificially circumscribed boxes, especially in technology markets. I totally agree on that. But so far as we are concerned, we have not really felt constrained in defining markets creatively, even within the given framework that the statute provides us. So I think that still a lot of issues can be taken care of. I mean, most of the issues can be taken care of given the legal framework. And yes, it depends on how you use the flexibility that the law provides, how you actually make use of it and use it appropriately to define the way markets should be defined. But I have not really felt that the Commission has, or at the case processing level, we have felt constrained by the factors given in the law or the frameworks given in the law, even from looking at from economics, economic perspective. Thank you.
Thank you very much. As a way of the last statement by the chairman to come in a form of a question, a statement has been made that sector-specific regulation is no longer relevant. Professor David Gerber, true or false? Sector-specific regulation is no longer relevant. If it is true, why? If it is false, why?
Maybe there is some kind of role for it. I don't see it right now, but I mean, it might be there. I don't know enough to say. So I can't really. So the point is just, maybe everybody hear me from the floor?
So I don't think I know enough. I'm not sure anybody knows enough.
Thank you. I think we have come to the end of this session. If we can give them a clap.
Yes.
Work well done. And I promised you that I was going to thank Katz on your behalf for inviting you to come and talk. So Pradeep, we thank you for inviting these people to come and talk at this event. Thank you very much.